There had been no words spoken. But a royal guard's eyes were enough to stop former U.S. President Barack Obama. This moment, which took place during a ceremonial visit to Wellington Barracks in London, was one of those minutes when history is quietly written. So, why did Obama break protocol? Why did a guard break his silence with a whisper? And how did the last sentence of a letter bring a leader to tears? This encounter was no ordinary diplomatic greeting. The crack in Arthur Price's stance was compounded by the weight of a letter left by his father's death. Obama's Cairo speech had become a source of hope in a man's battle with cancer. And now, the echo of that speech was being revived in his son's silence. This video reveals the invisible ties between leadership and humanity. If you, too, believe in the power of words and the depth of emotions, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because sometimes, the most powerful stories are hidden in silence. It was a gray, humid November morning in London. The sky was a thick, gloomy blanket draped over the city. But this gloom could not extinguish the energy of the extraordinary moment taking place in front of a monument at Wellington Barracks, right next to Buckingham Palace. This was the Guards' memorial, sacrifice and honor set in stone. And today, the crowd in front of the monument was different from usual. Because among them stood one of history's most important figures, former U.S. President Barack Obama. That moment was an unforgettable photograph for many of us. Obama, with his long, elegant posture, oblivious to the crowd around him, was looking at one of those legendary royal guards on duty in front of the monument. The soldier, standing ramrod straight like a statue, with his black boots, red tunic, and that iconic bearskin cap, was none other than Corporal Arthur Price. At that moment, I noticed the expression on Obama's face. This was not just a gesture of respect. There was a question, a curiosity on his face. It was as if he was trying to see the human inside that statue. Why wouldn't he? These men were the most disciplined, most impassive military figures in the world. No matter what, they wouldn't smile, talk, or move. They were like machines. But Obama knew the place of humanity inside that machine. So he stopped, he looked, and he decided to break those rules. He took a step toward the guard and spoke in a whisper. "That stance of yours," he said. "That stance requires a lot of discipline. Was someone in your family a soldier?" For Arthur Price, that moment was a breathtaking blow that stopped the flow of time. Imagine, all the discipline and protocol rules you've acquired in a lifetime, starting to shatter with a single question. One of the most powerful figures in the world was asking a personal question to a soldier who was taught not to react even if others laughed, yelled, or even mocked him. Arthur's eyes, under that bearskin cap, met Obama's eyes. The crowd was unaware of what was happening, they were only after a photograph. But at that moment, an invisible bridge was built between the two men. Arthur was struggling with a storm in his heart. Protocol told him to be silent. But the human inside him couldn't ignore that moment, that question. He remembered the letter his sister had found among his father's belongings a few weeks ago. His father, even in his final days, would listen to Obama's speeches. Especially the one he gave in Cairo. That speech had given his father hope and dignity during the last months of his battle with cancer. His father had wanted to tell Obama about this honor he felt while fighting cancer, but the letter was never sent. That letter his father had written but couldn't send. That letter had now become a knot of words that had accumulated in Arthur's heart, trying to come to his tongue. Obama sensed that small but profound difference in the guard's posture. He felt his momentary hesitation, the turmoil in his heart. He continued to speak to him, lowering his voice even more. This was a sign that a leader leads not only with his position but also with his humanity. That moment showed that the rule book, military protocols, and even a guard's unshakable stance could bow before humanity, emotion, and respect. Arthur's eyes began to well up. This was not just an encounter between a soldier and a statesman standing in front of a monument. This was the story of an invisible bond, of how a leader's words turned into a light during a family's most difficult moment. The answer Arthur was about to whisper would not only be a deviation from protocol but also a tribute to his father's last wish, to his gratitude for him. At that moment, a true moment of humanity was breaking through the grey London air. On that gloomy November morning in the heart of London's Wellington Barracks, Obama's whisper had pierced Arthur's armor like a bullet. Was someone in your family a soldier? It may have been a simple question, but it was enough to bring all the memories and emotions that had been suppressed for years in Arthur's heart to the surface. His body was standing ramrod straight, rigid, as his duty required. But the world inside him was being shaken by an earthquake. He could hear his father's letter, his sister's trembling voice in his ears. "Arthur, my dad has a letter for you. He never sent it. And now that letter was dancing right in the middle of his mind, as he looked into Obama's eyes. There was not only curiosity in Obama's eyes but also a glimmer of empathy, of understanding. He was not just a leader, he was a human who knew how to listen to others' stories. He saw the tremble in this guard's posture, the glazed expression in his eyes, everything. This was the posture of a human, not a robot. And he wanted to talk to that human. He took another step closer, lowering his voice even more. For the crowd around them, this moment was just a scene of two important men standing in front of a monument. But between them, a drama was unfolding that no one could see, that only the two of them knew about. Arthur fought a battle within. On one side was his trained self, screaming, "Protocol! Protocol! Never speak," and on the other side was the son, saying, "Tell him. Tell him for my father." His heart was pounding against his chest. This man had given his father hope in his final days. His words had been a light in his father's darkest moments. This silence was starting to feel like a betrayal. And then, the final question came for Arthur, one that crossed that last line. Obama, in an even lower voice, almost a whisper, asked, "Is your father still alive, son?" At that moment, Arthur's armor shattered. Protocol, rules, duty, all melted away in front of this single, small whisper. Arthur bowed his head slightly, and a trembling whisper came from his lips, "My father. He passed away this spring, sir." The words were choked in his throat, but there was no turning back now. The expression on Obama's face changed for a moment, and a deep sorrow appeared in his eyes. He understood. He now understood the reason for the difference in this young man's posture. Arthur continued to speak, his voice gaining strength. It was as if he was talking with his father's soul. They told me my father listened to your Cairo speech in his final days," he whispered. "Cancer. When he was struggling with it, he would get up every morning and listen to that speech. That speech where you talked about honor and hope. When my sister told me about this, she found the letter. He had written to you, but never sent it." Obama's eyes began to well up with this young guard's heartfelt confession. It was the greatest honor for him that his words could touch the life of a man he had never met, on the other side of the world. A leader's power was not in military strategies, economic deals, or diplomatic victories, but in the moments when he could touch a person's heart. And now, he was living that moment in all its nakedness. "What did the letter say?" Obama asked, his voice surprisingly soft. A tear streamed down Arthur's eye. No one noticed it, only Obama and Arthur knew. At the end of the letter, "He had one last wish," Arthur whispered. He wrote, "Perhaps one day you will meet my Arthur. Perhaps you will see what your words have created." This sentence had exploded like a bomb. That moment was a leadership lesson, a humanity lesson for Obama. He used to think that his speeches, the words he wrote, were once just a text. But now he understood that those words were saplings of hope that gave a father strength while fighting cancer, that reminded a son of the meaning of his duty. Arthur continued his words, no longer caring about protocol or anything else. He just wanted to share his father's legacy, the last sentence of that letter. "Before my father took his last breath, he told me something," he said. His voice was trembling like a leaf in the wind. He told me that dignity is not something that others give you. Dignity is something you don't let them take away from you." These words had penetrated the deepest part of Obama's heart. That was the truth behind all that discipline, that posture, that silence. This soldier was not just following a rule, he was carrying that honor, the dignity his father had left him as a legacy. This extraordinary moment, in front of the public, revealed the deep, unbreakable bond between leadership and humanity. Obama smiled slightly. It was a thank you, an appreciation, and a farewell. He nodded, as if to say, "I understand. Thank you." And then, he quietly continued on his way. Arthur Price completed his duty that day as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He was no longer just a royal guard. He was a son who honored his father's legacy. And he was the hero of that moment when one of the most powerful men in the world managed to see the human inside a soldier who was just a photograph. When Obama quietly left after that moment, a weight had been lifted from Arthur Price. His father's last wish, from that letter he never sent, had come true. His stance was no longer just a duty, it was also a promise given to his father. However, the echoes of this moment continued in Arthur's mind for a while longer. He had returned to his duty, adopting that rigid and disciplined posture again, but something had changed in the depths of his heart. That day, he had re-understood what it meant to be a royal guard. This was not just about wearing a uniform, carrying a rifle, or standing like a statue. This was about representing a value. He was representing that dignity, that honor his father had taught him, and which Obama's words had reinforced. Later that day, during the changing of the guard ceremony, Arthur's father's voice was echoing in his mind. A young guard, while walking toward his new post, stumbled slightly and faltered. It was a small mistake that a normal person wouldn't have noticed. But for Arthur, this was one of the most important tests of discipline. The other young guards ignored this small mistake, but Arthur's eyes lingered on the young soldier. He mentally went back to his own training. He remembered his father's last words, "Dignity is not something that others give you, but something you don't let them take away." This was not just about standing in front of a monument. This was about protecting the dignity in every step, in every breath, in every small movement. After the changing of the guard ceremony was completed, Arthur was left alone with the young guard. The young man's head was bowed in shame for the mistake he had made. "Corporal Price," he mumbled. Arthur put his hand on his shoulder. "That small fall, that momentary weakness. It's not important," he said. "What's important is how you continue when you get up. This uniform doesn't erase your individual mistakes, but it gives you an opportunity to make up for them. Even though your father passed away this spring, he taught me how honor and dignity can be carried not just in appearance, but even in the most difficult moments." The young guard was looking at him with surprise. He hadn't expected such an emotional, such a personal conversation from a royal guard. But Arthur had reached a completely different level with the experience he had that day. He was no longer just a soldier, he was a teacher. Meanwhile, a video of the incident that morning had started to spread rapidly on social media. A tourist had recorded that moment between Obama and Arthur from a distance. The sounds were not clearly audible, but Obama's leaning toward Arthur, Arthur's slight bow of his head, and the emotional intensity of that moment were spreading all over the world. The video was watched millions of times, and people were discussing what that moment meant. Many were asking, why did this guard cry? Some were wondering, did Obama say something to him? There were also arrogant and prejudiced comments. The guard lost his discipline. He failed in his duty. These comments showed how much these people were stuck on appearances, protocol, and superficial rules. They couldn't see the human behind the tough armor. But Arthur smiled at that comment. They knew. Those who knew where true power came from, and what dignity and honor meant, did not care about these comments. Days and weeks passed. That video became one of the unforgettable moments. But for Arthur, this was not a momentary fame. This was an experience that changed his life, showing him once again how valuable his father's legacy was. He was still on duty at Wellington Barracks. In every changing of the guard, in every step, in every moment, he remembered his father's last words. A few months later, Arthur's commander called him into his office. There was a worried expression on the young guard's face sitting opposite him. "Price," said the commander. "After that video with Obama that day, some people thought you broke protocol." Arthur's heart stopped for a moment. However, the commander continued, "We saw the true meaning of that moment. True discipline is not just about following rules. True discipline comes from being human, being sensitive, and listening to your heart." The commander handed him an envelope from his desk. "This came from a high-ranking officer for you." He opened the envelope. Inside, there was a simple, handwritten note. The note read, "Corporal Arthur Price. Your fathers and your honor reminded me of where true strength comes from. Sometimes the most important conversations are held in the most silent moments. Your story has retaught me this. Thank you, Mr. Obama." The signature was Barack Obama's own handwriting. Arthur's eyes welled up again. This was more than a medal, a promotion, or a praise. This was proof that a leader had truly understood his father's legacy, the last wish of that letter. At that moment, Arthur's respect for his father, his feeling of pride for him, had grown even stronger. This story shows that what is seen from the outside is only the tip of an iceberg. Behind a guard's rigid stance lay a father's last wish, a son's honor, and the purest emotions of humanity. True power is not hidden in appearances, but in the heart, in values, and in honesty. So what do you think? Does what truly makes a leader is the ability to touch people, or just their power and title? Share the lessons you've learned from this story with us in the comments. The grim air of London couldn't extinguish the fire in Arthur's heart. The note he read in his commander's office wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a testament to his father's honor, endorsed by the highest office. This note had affected Arthur even more deeply. He was no longer just a guard, but the hero of a story. The core theme of this story was the profound meanings behind appearances, the fine line between arrogance and respect. This wasn't just a memory, but a lesson for the future. This event involving Arthur had spread beyond the walls of Wellington Barracks, reaching the entire world. People from different cultures, connected by the power of the internet, were discussing the story. While some had always seen the royal guards as mere tourist figures, this incident showed them the deep discipline and humanity behind these men. The story had shattered many of their prejudices. After all, there are moments in all our lives when a fleeting interaction, a word, or a glance can change our entire perspective. Arthur's story was exactly that. As the story gained popularity, a noticeable change was observed in the attitude of the tourists visiting the barracks. The crowds that had previously approached with mockery, trying to test the guards' patience, had been replaced by a more respectful and understanding one. The people gathering around the guards were no longer there just to take a selfie, but to witness that unique discipline and tradition. Many tourists would stand silently, watching Arthur on duty, showing him respect. This was a concrete example of how arrogance gave way to humility, and prejudice to respect. However, every story has an antagonist. This one was no different. A group of young people came to the barracks, determined to test the guards' discipline for social media fame. One of them deliberately stood in front of Arthur and rudely tried to get him to talk. "Hey, mate. Why are you standing there like a statue? Come on, give us a smile," he shouted. Arthur, as always, remained unresponsive. But the young man persisted. "I'm telling you, give us some entertainment. Isn't that what you're for?" he continued in a loud voice. The voice inside Arthur reminded him of his father's words on honor and dignity. This young man's arrogance wasn't a challenge for him. On the contrary, it was an opportunity. An opportunity to show people once again what true power was. Not a fight, not a shout, not a reaction. The best response to this young man would be silence and unshakable discipline. When the young man got no reaction from Arthur, he decided to go further. He splashed water from his bottle onto Arthur's face. The crowd was in shock. This was an insult, a disrespect. The young man, laughing, yelled, "See, I splashed a statue and there's still no reaction." But his laughter didn't last long. The crowd around Arthur was now looking at the young man with anger. This was an insult to a soldier, a hero. At that moment, something unexpected happened. An elderly woman from the crowd walked up to the young man and took hold of his arm. "Son," she said, her voice soft but firm. "That man is not a statue. He represents the honor and dignity of this country. You, on the other hand, are representing your own arrogance. Didn't your father teach you respect?" The young man recoiled in surprise. He had not expected such a reaction. Several others came to the elderly woman's side and nodded in agreement. The young man, faced with the silent but powerful reaction of the crowd, was so ashamed he didn't know what to do. He quickly walked away. Arthur, through all of this, didn't break his stance. He didn't even blink. At that moment, it was proven once again that true power is shown not through an external action, but through an inner serenity. The crowd applauded silently. This was a show of respect for Arthur's discipline and the elderly woman's brave stand. This story tells of a moment where arrogance and dignity, disrespect and honor came face to face. So, what do you think truly makes a person powerful? Is it the power to dominate others, or the ability to hold on to your values even in the most difficult moments? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you're curious to see how this story continues, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. The young man's arrogant challenge was defeated by the wise stance of an elderly woman. For Arthur Price, this was a moment of victory. But this victory wasn't won through a fight or a harsh intervention, but through the silent power of honor and dignity. That day, the crowd didn't just see a tourist, but someone who had lost their human values, and they were reminded how a soldier representing those values should be treated. After this incident, Arthur became an even more respected figure. He was no longer just a character in a story, he had become a symbol. A few months after this event, on a routine day of duty for Arthur, the weather was cold and damp as usual. The crowd was much more respectful than in previous months, but it still contained all sorts of people. On that day, there was an elderly couple in the crowd. What caught Arthur's eye was that the man was in a wheelchair. The woman was holding her husband's hand, whispering something to him. Her eyes were filled with love and a touch of sadness. From the professional distance of his duty, Arthur became curious about this couple's story. The couple stood a little ways away from where Arthur was on duty. The man, from his wheelchair, watched Arthur's every movement and every posture with great care, oblivious to the crowd around him. Arthur sensed something in the old man's eyes. It wasn't just a tourist's curiosity. It was a deep understanding, perhaps a connection from the past. There was a profound respect in the old man's eyes. The reason for this curiosity soon became clear. The couple began to approach Arthur. The woman walked slowly, pushing her husband's wheelchair. Arthur, according to protocol, didn't move or even blink. Yet something in his heart was pulling him towards the old man. The man stopped his wheelchair directly in front of Arthur. A trembling whisper escaped his lips, "My son. You stand with such honor." Arthur's body stiffened for a moment. This was against protocol. It was something that shouldn't be said to a sentry soldier. But at that moment, he remembered his experience with Obama. On that day, he had learned that humanity transcends rules. He fixed his gaze on the old man. The old man slowly put his hand on his heart. "Your father. He would have been so proud," he whispered. At that moment, all of Arthur's armor melted away. This man knew his father. The woman handed Arthur a photograph. In the photo, Arthur's father, as a young soldier, was smiling next to the old man in the wheelchair. The old man was Arthur's father's best friend, a comrade from the front lines. They had fought side by side in the same war, protecting each other. But at the end of the war, the old man had lost his legs, while Arthur's father had survived, though wounded. Arthur's father had never left his friend's side, treating him like a brother for the rest of his life. At that moment, a tear rolled down Arthur's eye. This wasn't a violation of his duty. This was about being human. This was about seeing the living proof of his father's legacy. As the old man passed by Arthur, still holding his stance, he gave a slow military salute with a trembling hand from his wheelchair. It was a salute that had no place in the protocol, but it was a show of respect and honor worth all the protocols in the world. Arthur couldn't salute back, but he knew what that moment meant in his heart. This moment had also caught the crowd's attention. Those who saw it watched the bond between the two men in silence, unable to hold back their tears. This story was not just about a soldier and a leader's encounter. This was a story of friendship, loyalty, and an honorable legacy passed from father to son. It had once again proven that the unyielding stance of a soldier could contain the deepest of emotions. Arthur Price, as he finished his duty and walked through the historic corridors of Wellington Barracks, had countless memories swirling in his mind. He was no longer just a guard, he was a living symbol of honor, dignity, and humanity. His father's last words, the unbelievable moment with Barack Obama, the salute from the old man in the wheelchair. Each was like a puzzle piece, completing the picture of his life, adding new meaning to every step he took. Under the dim lights of the barracks, as he returned to his room, he picked up the small envelope on his table. Inside, was the letter his father had written but never sent. He opened it and read the lines once more. Every word was a testament to how his father had clung to hope and dignity even in his final months, battling cancer. His father wrote about the strength he found in Obama's speeches. The letter ended with the sentence, "Maybe one day you'll meet my Arthur, maybe you'll see what your words have created." Arthur now knew that this wish had not only come true, but had also given a lesson to the entire world. At the end of the letter, there was another note, written in his mother's shaky handwriting, which he had missed before. "My son, the thing your father was most proud of was not the discipline that came with being a soldier, but his ability to be a good person in all circumstances. Remember, true power isn't in the authority of a uniform, but in the compassion in your heart." These words gave a final meaning to everything Arthur had experienced. He had always been trained to be a soldier, but life had taught him that true power lay in humanity, in empathy, and in staying true to his values. The next morning, Arthur started his duty as usual. But this time, the eyes shining under his bearskin hat were more determined and clearer than ever before. He wasn't just a royal guard, he was a son carrying his father's legacy on his shoulders. In the crowd, a group of young vloggers was live streaming a video titled "London Guards Freakout Challenge." One of them stepped in front of Arthur and rudely tried to get him to react. "Hey, soldier boy," he shouted. "Come on, smile, what a stupid job you have. Go on, do something." The young man's voice was mixed with the sound of the live stream. Arthur didn't even blink. This challenge reminded him of the previous disrespectful tourist. But now, his perspective was completely different. These young people were acting without knowing how far they were from true values, not just for attention. For them, this was just a challenge. But for Arthur, it was a test of honor. He remembered his father's last words, "Dignity is not something others give you, it is something you don't let them take away from you." Arthur knew the best lesson he could give these young people was to not let them take that value away from him. When the young vlogger got no reaction from Arthur, he decided to push it further. He brought his cell phone closer to Arthur's face, insulting him on the live stream. "What a stupid job," he muttered. "He's standing there like a statue. It's useless. This guy's life must be so boring. Just then, an old man from the crowd walked up to the young vlogger. This was an ordinary English gentleman, one he had never seen before. The old man approached the vlogger and spoke in a calm but firm voice. "Son," he said, "this might be a game for you. But for him, it's a duty. The place he stands is part of this country's history, traditions, and honor. You see him as a showman, but he is a patriot. His stance is not just a figure, it's a symbol representing this country's values. What you're doing is disrespectful not just to yourself, but to these values as well." The young vlogger, taken aback by the old man's unexpected and wise words, stepped back in confusion. The live stream's viewers were supporting the old man and fiercely criticizing the young man in the comments, with comments full of surprise and admiration. The young man, in shame, put his phone down and quickly walked away. The crowd gave a silent round of applause, showing their appreciation for the old man and Arthur. At that moment, it was proven once again how arrogance and disrespect were defeated by honor and dignity. Throughout all of this, Arthur never broke his stance. But inside, he was thanking the old man, all the honorable people, his own father, and Barack Obama. Because they had shown him that dignity was not just an individual virtue but a collective value. True power was the ability to hold on to your values, even in the face of arrogance, mockery, or insult. Arthur Price's story was more than just a soldier's tale, it was a universal lesson. By honoring his father's legacy, finding inspiration in a leader's words, and preserving his own stance in the most difficult moments, he had proven to the whole world what true power was. And that day, even the grim air of London was brightened by this honorable stance. What do you think truly makes a person powerful? Is it the power to dominate others, or the ability to hold on to your values in the most difficult moments? If this story made you think, don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Remember, true dignity is something you don't let others take from you, even in the hardest times.